Good morning, Year 6. It is Wednesday, the 10th of February, and we are on to Poem 3 today. Now, I've put some images on here today to just make it clear that our poem is all about a dragon, but you might not have been able to tell that it was a dragon from the title because it's quite a tricky title to say. Your poem today is called Troglodytic Owner Occupier. Now, in a moment, we're going to talk about what on earth that title means, but it's a brilliant poem, and it's written by the poet Nick Toksek. So we're going to read this today, and again we'll do a little bit of read aloud, think aloud. So if you have your poem ready, then we can be making our notes in just one moment. Okay, so Troglodytic Owner Occupier. Old flyer with a belly full of fire, that's hotter than a deep fat fryer. Your tongue is tougher than a tire, thicker and harder and drier. You've the appetite of a vampire. Old flyer with a belly full of fire, you're driven by desire to acquire. You trickster, rogue and liar, you've eyes like snakes but slyer. They're sharp as thorns on briar. Old flyer with a belly full of fire, Mr. Mayhem Multiplier. Your cries are terrifier, the sound of a suffering choir entangled in barbed wire. Old flyer with a belly full of fire, soaring higher than church and spire. Your lord and magnifier, his dragonship esquire, arrogant for all to admire. And I think that's an amazing poem describing our dragon today, and it will be really interesting how you interpret some of the language and why Nick Toksek has chosen to describe a dragon in this way. So going to the title of the poem, what I've done for you, and you'll see this green and blue group on your question page, is I have pulled out the definitions. So troglodyte, that's how you say troglodyte. This is what troglodyte means. So it's a member of a fabulous or prehistoric race of people that lived in caves, dens or holes. Well, immediately that makes me think, yeah, a dragon is a prehistoric race, a legendary race, of course, living in caves and dens. That's what we know about dragons, these mythological creatures. Troglodyte could also be a person considered to be reclusive. That means if you're a recluse, you are on your own, so to speak. An anthropoid ape, such as a gorilla or chimpanzee, well, I'm not sure if that necessarily makes me think straight away of a dragon, but this one perhaps does. An animal that lives underground. Could our dragon have a dwelling underground? So troglodyte. It's interesting to see the link between troglodytes and dragons. Okay. The second part is owner-occupier. So an occupant who owns the home that he or she lives in, someone who lives at a particular place for a prolonged period, or who was born there. Well, again, that maybe suggests that our dragon has lived for a very long time, has lived in their dwelling for a really long time. So almost suggests it's kind of very established in its home, but also perhaps that it's been there a long time. And going back to the troglodyte theme, that it's really old, it's quite ancient and reclusive. Okay, so from looking at those definitions, when it comes to it, blue and green group, you may need to interpret that to try and explain the title in your own words, but those definitions will certainly help you. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of read aloud, think aloud today, but I'm only going to do the first two stanzas. I'll leave the rest to you, as you're very good at read aloud, think aloud, and just thinking about what this is suggesting to you. So going back to what we said about the troglodyte being old, you see this repetition, and in fact you'll notice that every line starts in the same way. Old flyer with a belly full of fire. And clearly that is telling me that our dragon is perhaps a fire-breathing dragon. So straight away, my first thought, it's a fire breather. Okay. Hotter than a deep fat fryer, your tongue is tougher than a tyre, thicker and harder and drier. So this is telling me quite a lot about the mouth, about its tongue, its breath. So it's focusing on one part of the dragon. And it's almost suggesting, obviously very, very hot. Your belly full of fire is really hot. But also the fact that your tongue is tougher than a tyre and thicker and harder, it's using, it's suggesting this sort of very tough language about this dragon. One thing that I focus on here is that it said you've got the appetite of a vampire, which suggests to me it's a hunter, a lust for blood, definitely wants to hunt animals of some kind, or maybe I should change that to other creatures. Think about what that makes you think about. Okay. I'm just going to look at this next one now and just pull out a couple of words and language. This is going to come up in one of your questions. So you're driven by desire to acquire. What does acquire mean? What does that mean to you? I really love the words trickster, rogue and liar. You're a trickster, you play tricks, you're a rogue and you're a liar. So it's all suggesting that sort of dishonesty, trickery. So I wouldn't trust this dragon. Okay, what I'd now like you to do is go into a lot more detail than I have in my Read Aloud, Think Aloud. I've just given you an idea of how I'm pulling out just some, I'm just selecting some of the language and some of the phrases that have been used here. But I'd really love it now if you take some time to do your Read Aloud, Think Aloud, really pull this poem apart, pull the language apart. What is it telling you? What image is it giving you of this dragon? So now, yellow group, you have some questions to answer, which I will go through with you now. So you've done your Read Aloud, Think Aloud. You may have done that along with me or separately. First thing I'd like you to do is think about what similes have been used in the poem. Can you write them down? And just changing my task here, I'd like you to write 2 of them down. So 2 examples of simile. What do all of the end words rhyme with and why? Can you find 3 examples of alliteration? So thinking back to what we did on Monday, remembering alliteration, so looking at the first letter of each word, like dancing dragon, for example. And then I'd like you to think about this. For the first 3 verses, the poem is almost criticising dragons. But in the last, it describes them very differently. And I'd like you to tell me why. What is the last verse doing that the first 3 weren't? So try and explain that answer, please. So good luck with that, yellow group, and we look forward to seeing your answers.